get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And Happy New Year, Kneecaps Nation. It's another Detroit Lions winner here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by Phil Byrne. Phil, Happy New Year to you, buddy.
Happy New Year. Yeah, good to still kind of reconvene back with you after a couple of crazy nights. We had the Monday night game. We had New Year's Eve. It's now New Year's Day when we're recording this. Feels like a lot has happened in a short amount of time. And hey, you know what? The Lions are still in the hunt for the NFC North, which is great because we keep winning, but those darn Minnesota Vikings do also. And of course, it's now the showdown Sunday night football. We got a whole lot to talk about, Vince.
Yeah, we sure do. And of course, the Lions did not get any help from the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings outcome. So the game on Sunday night between the Vikings and the Lions at Ford Field will be for all the marbles. Phil, as a lifelong Lions fan, I want to know what your approach to this was. Were you in that group that was kind of actively rooting for the Green Bay Packers to pull off that upset, or were you kind of the opposite of, you know what, forget about what happens in that game. We still have the chance to take care of our business on our own, regardless of what happens in a different game in a different venue?
I don't want to say I was like rooting outwardly for Green Bay, but like that, a Green Bay win would have been my preferred outcome. You know, I mean, I still watch the game. But it's one of those things that, like, you know, the Green Bay Packers, just because, you know, being around the same age as me, Vince, we saw them completely dominate this series for such an extended period of time. And for our lifetime, they've really have had 3 quarterbacks, and that's it, right? The Green Bay Packers are my most hated franchise. So, I mean, it really takes a lot for me to try to root for them, you know, for any sort of win. And quite frankly, it's just kind of one of those things that it's so late in the season now that it's kind of just, well, I kind of felt like we were going to have to take care of business anyways, you know? So that's kind of how I approached that a little bit. So it would have been nice had, you know, Minnesota lost, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or something like that. And this wasn't something that we had to really worry about so much. But now here we are. You know, this is the situation that's presented itself. And like you said, it's for all the marbles.
Yeah, and on another note, if I have to hear one more word about how great of a coach Matt LaFleur is one more time, I'm going to freak out. I mean, put it this way, the next big game that Matt LaFleur wins is going to be his first. But you know what? It doesn't matter. They can go and do whatever they want and get bounced out early or whatever the case may be. We got a job to do coming up on Sunday, but we knew what this was going into the game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. So therein lied the question of, what do you do? Do you rest the starters and kind of use this as a de facto first-round bye scenario where you're letting the backups kind of do what they do and let the heavy hitters kind of take the night off? Or do you go all in to win? And obviously the Lions chose option B. What did you think about the decision, Phil? Personally, would that have been what you would have done in that situation, knowing what the injury history for the Lions has been this season, knowing what was coming up next game up this coming Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, it would have been nice maybe like start of the 4th quarter if our defense was halfway as efficient, not putting as many points up on the board or allowing San Francisco to put as many points up on the board where, yeah, we could have rested some guys. But going full throttle with your starters out of the gate was 100% the direction I would have went with. I think this is a thing that we have taken on the identity of Dan Campbell and how he wants to coach. And, you know, unless it was like some weird situation where we got into like a 4-game lead at the end of the year and we clinched a month ago or something, I don't think it's in his MO to rest this team up. You know, the resting is for the preseason. We saw that where basically the entire team didn't even play. These games count in every sort of meaningful stat that you're looking for. These players, when they're going out there, A lot of times their bonuses at the end of the year are dependent on playing time and stats and getting those reps and things like that. Dan Campbell knows that as a former player. So I would have went with the same approach. I personally would have probably pulled some people in the fourth quarter had we been in the scenario where we had built up a lead and we felt comfortable with where we were at. That did not provide itself, and of course, that is a whole other wrinkle in which we'll get into with the Minnesota game, I'm sure. But yeah, I would have taken the same approach. I think this team is still capable of getting these wins, even as the defense is there. Now, thankfully, we did get out without, as far as I can tell, any significant injuries.
Second game in a row, no less. I don't think there was
Yeah,
anybody that had to be helped off the field or even anybody that was obviously hampered. I know maybe a guy or two got shaken up on a play, but they seem no worse for the wear. So it's kind of ironic that you go so long over the course of a season where you couldn't get anything to go right from an injury standpoint. And now, once it almost seemed like we hit rock bottom, we were able to put two games together in a row. There wasn't a whole lot in the way of injuries to speak of. So that is very good news. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the 49ers game because a lot of our feedback and responses is kind of going to piggyback off our look ahead to the Vikings game. So what I
hmm
do want to do is, as we always do, wrap up our first bites with our game balls from the 49ers game. Who do you think is going to be most deserving of the Phil Byrne game ball from this past week?
I'm going to go Jameer Gibbs. I think his ability to take command a little bit of the running game when it needs to, still be able to contribute in the passing game as a receiver a little bit, still showcasing his flash and his speed when he can. Yes, we do miss David Montgomery because it's a different running style. There's no doubt about that. Hopefully, we'll see. Maybe we can even get him back for Minnesota here in a little bit. But Jameer Gibbs, I think, has done a fabulous job of just kind of taking the bulk of the carries. Yes, they have spelled him a little bit with Jamar Jefferson and Craig Reynolds a little bit there. But my game ball is going to Jameer Gibbs. I think he's making a tremendous impact still on this offense.
Mine's going to be Kirby Joseph, and we're going to get into this in a couple of
Yeah,
minutes here about the defense, but the game could have gone in a different direction altogether if it weren't for number one, Jake Moody completely losing his mind as the 49ers kicker and leaving an entire touchdown's worth on the table, but also from two very well timed interceptions by Kirby Joseph. And things would have even been a little bit better for his day had he not gotten into the little scuffle between Ricky Pearsall and they were
yeah. I think it was Terry and Arnold. I
oh, it
think.
was Terrion. Yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
And then Kirby goes in at the very end and sticks his nose where it didn't belong, and he wound up getting the drawing a flag for that. So that directly
yeah.
led to more points by San Francisco. But beyond that, it was a solid day by him creating two turnovers, and that's something that the Lions have not done a real great job of since the injuries have really started to pile up was the turnover generation. You were kind of waiting for
Yeah.
things to start to regress towards the mean in the other direction a little bit. Okay, they were so far ahead of things to start the season, and then they really leveled off in a way that is not like them at all. It was nice to see them finally get off the schneid with a couple of well-timed turnovers.
Before we get into the Minnesota game here a little bit, I think offhand we know, I think maybe it might not be first team or second team or things like that. I think Jared Goff at one point in time was in the MVP discussion. What I would like to do, kind of as we get at the tail end of this, is kind of have a who would you put from this Lions team on a first or second team All Pro team? So if you see either Vince or myself here over the next week or so, let us know because I think this Lions team is going to be stacked with guys like that. You mentioned it with Kirby Joseph right there, leading the league in interceptions. Even though it is a little bit of a porous defense right now, is he going to get that recognition that he could so deserve? Or Brian Branch as well, So I think those are some things that kind of once maybe the season winds down a little bit, we can have a discussion about because it'll be kind of interesting there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I believe the official Pro Bowl fan votes were released in the last couple of days. And just to kind of paint the picture of the level of fan engagement, if you will,
Yeah.
the Lions led the NFL as far as their players receiving votes. So out of every team in the NFL, all 32 teams, more votes went to Lions players than
Hmm.
any of the other 31 franchises. You have Jahmyr Gibbs that received the second most Pro Bowl votes by the fans than any other player in the NFL. The only player that received more votes than Jahmyr Gibbs would be Travis Kelce, and I think we all know a good reason as to why he was able to generate the support that he did. Over 250,000 votes to Jahmyr Gibbs. Jared Goff was fifth in overall voting for the Pro Bowl, the second in NFC quarterbacks, just a hair
Yeah.
behind Jaden Daniels. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Lions that led all NFC position groups in
Mm.
Pro Bowl voting. So it's pretty safe to say that not only is the Lions fan base behind their own guys,
Yeah.
they're definitely getting a lot of recognition from the league at large, because I don't think that Lions fans have that much time on their hands to be just stuffing the Pro Bowl ballot box for weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah. We like our fair elections here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, are we ready for breaking news? Because again, this is a very
Oh,
fluid. This is all a very fluid situation here. So we
there
are
we go.
recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, New Year's Day, and life is going on around us. So here is the practice report from
Mm.
Wednesday, their first practice as we head into Vikings week. So we have Alex Anzalone back at practice, limited, but back at practice. You have Emmanuel Mosley that did not practice due to illness, neither here nor there, because he really hasn't been all that effective since he was taken off of injured reserve. David Montgomery did not practice, not a major surprise there. Jack Campbell limited with a rib injury. Amik Robertson limited with a calf. Khalif Raymond back at practice from last week also. He was a full participant in the Wednesday practice.
You know, I'm glad you brought this up because friend of the program, Steve Maddie, who lives in the
Yeah.
Royal Oak area, actually happened to catch Alex Anzalone coming out of Whole Foods
Gator Boy.
in Royal Oak the other day, and was like, "Yeah, he was walking around fine. Didn't have a cast on or anything." So, Steve, if you're listening to this, appreciate the tip on that. But to bring that full circle, based on that practice report, Vince, I think we're going to see Double A line up here. I think he's giving it a go on Sunday.
So the question is, if he does give it a go, what's he going to do on the NBC player intro for Sunday Night Football? Is he going to say Gator Boy, or is he going to say Father of Two?
Oh, that's a good point.
Or is he going to
Yeah.
come up with
Oh, maybe
something
he's a high
totally
school
different?
guy. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
could be,
Yeah.
could be. So before we get all the way in on the Viking stuff, a lot of history being made, as we kind of hinted at earlier. So the Lions continue to add to their overall win count, 14 wins, most in franchise history, 8-0 on the road, best in franchise history on the road. And again, it
Yeah.
still blows my mind all those years where they would go dozens of games at a time without so much as running into one on the road.
Hmm.
And now they're as dominant as what you can ask for. Only the 2020 Chiefs were able to pull off such a thing in the last handful of years, and they went on to the Super Bowl that year. So I would say that was pretty good. The Lions set an NFL record for offense the other day. 5 games where they scored 40 points and did not turn the ball over once. That's efficiency that is championship worthy right there, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes back to Goff. That comes back to Ben Johnson. That comes back to Amon-Ra St. Brown, the offensive line. There was a crazy tidbit. You know, we're talking about efficiency and things like that. The after Monday Night Football kind of set interview, Scott Van Pelt, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. Scott Van Pelt asked about how many times the Lions kind of work these trick plays in, and
We've seen the hook and ladder a handful of
yeah,
times this year.
Yeah, so they're really comfortable with it. Maybe they've interchanged some of the people, maybe slightly some of the blocking or the receiving routes. Um, Amon-Ra St. Brown he said they tried it just 3 times in practice. That's how good these guys are at executing. I mean, they
Yeah.
are the definition of pros, right? For what they're doing, that they feel so supremely confident that they can just do it after 3 times and master it, pull it off for a long touchdown like that, and have a game-changing kind of play.
More history, and this piggybacks off the efficiency quotient here. Jared Goff's 75% completion percentage in the game against the 49ers. That's the 8th time this season that he's done that. He joins Tom Brady from 2007, from that vaunted 2007 Patriots offense, as the only 2 occasions that's been done by quarterbacks in NFL history. With the game against the 49ers between St. Brown and J-Mo as the receivers and Montgomery and Gibbs as the running backs. The Lions are the first team in NFL history to have 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers all produce at least 1,000 scrimmage yards in the same season.
Wow.
We're getting into like outer space territory right here, Phil.
Yeah. I can't remember who this went to. I certainly did not come up with it. Of course, we remember the greatest show on turf, right? With the St. Louis Rams, Kurt Warner, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Marshall
Faulk.
Faulk. I've heard it a couple times on local sports radio. I think just by people who called in, trying to call this the grittiest show on turf, and I kind of like that because
Grit don't quit.
Grit don't quit. It kind of combines a little bit of that game breaking offense, and of course we saw way back when 25 years ago with the St. Louis Rams and kind of the grit mindset, where this team is really tough on top of it. So kind of like that as well. But man, yeah, it's needed when you get into these shootouts, right? To pull away when it matters the most in the fourth quarter.
Yep, and last but not least, the Lions set a single season franchise record for the most games with 70-plus scrimmage yards by a player. You give that to the guy who you just gave your game ball out to, Phil, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, and he's just been, again, for one of those draft day decisions that I just remember when that happened live going like, we did what?
Because remember, we had
Swift, man,
Swift and we had Jamal Williams, who had just set the single season touchdown record by a running back, and we were like, okay, if nothing else, we're set at running back. We just need more help and fortification in all these other areas. And here they just launched both of them into space, and it's like, well, now what? We got this guy we just brought over from the Bears that just seems to be okay, and this rookie running back that we don't really need, and who are we, Phil?
Brad Holmes out here playing chess.
Yeah.
We're just playing checkers.
Who are we? All right, so the stage is set. As we said, Vikings and the Lions, Sunday Night Football. I called it on last week's episode that if it did come down to this, it would be the Sunday night game. It would be the final game of the NFL regular season. And, of course, the NFL followed that direction there. This is going to be the biggest regular season game in league history from a playoff implication standpoint. And the reason being is we've never seen 2 teams take the field at the same time in the regular season with 14 wins apiece. So somebody is going to launch into that number 1 overall seed, not have to leave home, not have to play outdoors again the whole rest of the season. And the other team is going to drop all the way down to the number 5 seed, get the wild card, and will have to go on the road and stay on the road unless there's some crazy series of upsets that starts happening elsewhere in the NFC playoffs.
Yeah. Isn't that so strange that that's what it's come down to? You go through all those records, you go through all the efficiencies, you go and it comes down to one game. It comes down to one game. And I think looking at the season, obviously our projections are out the window this time. They've exceeded what our projections were.
Both ways.
I think we
both buried Minnesota once the McCarthy injury happened, because we didn't believe in Darnold. We didn't believe that he'd be able to keep the other guys involved. We didn't think that Aaron Jones would be the answer to keep their running game afloat.
But who would have thought that, Buffalo, I think going into that, I thought the game was a toss up. But that second game of the year against Tampa, losing that one and not having the red zone efficiency that we would so eventually see and kind of enjoy and kind of get used to with this team, things just weren't clicking that game. That is the game that ultimately is still making this even a contest. Credit Minnesota for getting to where they are, and obviously we saw their locker room celebration with Sam Darnold, and it looks like they're fully bought in with Darnold. I'm sure he'll be a part of the future with that team moving forward in some form. You can't
Yeah.
just never
I
predict,
I
but
don't think it's in their best interest to throw them in
no,
the garbage after this season.
yeah, yeah. So, really, really unprecedented situation we're in here. I think word kind of got out yesterday that we're going to go back to those black jerseys in prime time,
Yep, all
the
black.
alternates.
How do you feel
So we'll
about
get.
that?
Well, here's the thing. I like the way they look, but I also know the last time I saw them, we got it handed to us by Buffalo. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, is this a case of like the players like to wear them and it makes them a little bit more comfortable and the Buffalo game just got away from us? Or is this just a bad juju already kind of starting, going back to the uniforms? And hey, let us not forget one of the main reasons, those black jerseys went away, even though Dan Campbell loved them, was they were a product of a bygone era under Matt Millen.
Yeah.
That I remember Mike Williams, Ernie Sims, Kevin Jones, Roy Williams, those were the guys that you could get black jerseys of for the Lions back in the day. John Kitna, maybe I think is the quarterback. So here we are. It's showdown Sunday. Collinsworth and Tirico on the call. Sunday Night Football. It's going to be something.
Yeah, it just kind of had me wondering a little bit. Like, I was thinking, okay, you've got to ride the hot hand. And I know they did this with the road jerseys, doing the all white
Yeah,
thing. And they went 8-0 on the road this year wearing their all white uniforms. We know that anytime they add a little wrinkles into the uniform, like Tampa Bay, it was blue jerseys but silver pants. They
they haven't
lost.
worn those silver pants at
They
home
haven't
since
seen them
then.
since. With
Yeah,
the Buffalo game, they wore the all blacks, which okay, we were going to see them at least one other time besides Seattle. They lost. When's the last time, Phil, they've had the all blues, the blueberries, and lost a game? I can't remember when it is. It wasn't this season. I highly doubt it was last season. That takes us back to 2022. Wouldn't it, if you're
yeah,
superstitious, wouldn't it make
yeah.
more sense to stick with the all blue and just kind of see what happens?
You would think. You would think, right?
Yeah, who are we? So let's cut to the chase here, Phil. I think the biggest concern heading into this game, Sunday Night Football against the Lions against the Vikings, is going to be how is this defense, as it's constructed, what we've seen from them over the last handful of weeks.
Yeah.
What's going to be their best shot at success at slowing down this Vikings offense, which we have not seen any type of real drop off with Sam Darnold at quarterback, Justin Jefferson leading a solid group of
Yeah.
guys to throw the ball to. And I'm not just counting them as receivers, I'm just including all position groups, guys to throw the ball to. What's going to be the secret combination to just for a one night only, 60 minutes, getting the job done? Because I'm not going to lie to you, Phil, I'm concerned. So start talking me off the
Yeah.
ledge a little bit.
Okay, so it comes back to the guy that we mentioned that sounds like he is going to play, and that's Alex Anzalone. You need him on the field as much as you can get out of him. I realize he may have a broken wing still. It may not be 100% healed, but they put this timeline in place to try to get him to play. The next piece of that is you got to get Effie Melifanu on the field as well. I think those two with Jack Campbell need to be viewed as basically your linebackers, right? So Melifanu, yes, he is a defensive back by trade. What I'm deeply concerned about in this game is the fact that you obviously have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and we do not have Carlton Davis in this one. So I would assume it's going to be Terrion Arnold on Justin Jefferson. And yes, Darnold could go ahead and bomb it 70 yards deep to him and probably still beat Terrion Arnold. But I think you can kind of mix up some of the coverages, maybe go into a little bit of man-to-man so that it doesn't happen. What he is so good at and what Addison is so good at is the crossing stuff across the middle. And I think that's where having Anzalone there, maybe for a big hit once in a while, and Melifonwu as well, they can guard that a little bit better, being kind of in the linebacker range of things. That's going to be the big thing. The running game for Minnesota, Aaron Jones is always pretty good. We've seen better running backs, better running attacks this year. If they're gonna beat us, they're gonna score 50 points, and it's gonna be Darnold is throwing for 375 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Justin Jefferson goes off. Carlton Davis gets flagged with all these PIs that have just been an absolute threat to us all game long. And yes, we do have legit concerns, but we have to watch the things over the middle. We have to watch the crossing routes. That's where he gets into open space and really creates a lot of carnage. So I like having 2 safeties back. I love our safeties for what we can do. So long as we can have Branch and we can have Kirby Joseph kind of play that 2 high safeties, I think that will aid a little bit in the approach of like not getting beat deep. And then, of course, they're going to have to do their job and get a pick or 2 in this game as well. Stop one of these drives that they have. But Vince, I'd be lying to you. I think we're in for a game like we just saw in San Francisco. I think we're seeing a much better offense than what we saw in San Francisco. Obviously, they were completely detrimented, not having a guy like Trent Williams out there, not having all the running backs that they've got out there. Yes, they still have George Kittle. Who are the receivers?
Deebo
Pearsall,
Samuel's a shell of his former self.
Exactly. So
that leads into the next point, though, Phil. How
yeah.
can you take any type of real confidence in what we have with this defense as it currently sits, knowing that San Francisco, for the most part, particularly in the first half, was able to move the ball at will, score at will, and again, it took 2 well-timed interceptions by Kirby Joseph and Jake Moody out there completely losing his mind as the 49ers kicker. I don't think if neither of those things happen, we're having the same conversation and having really any good feeling at all.
I'll kind of add this a little bit. I listen. He's not Caleb Williams. He's not whoever some of the Josh Allen. Shoot, but Brock Purdy can run a little bit. Sam Darnold is more in the Jared Goff camp. You're going to have to give him a full 20 seconds if he's going to beat you with his legs. So I think that was an element that kind of tested the defense a little bit. Of course, Brock Purdy did have that rushing touchdown out from about 9 yards or so, I think, kind of going into that one. And I don't think that's going to be the same thing with Darnold. George Kittle, in my book, still the best tight end in the league, even if his stats maybe don't show it this year. Hawkinson, still very, very good. Obviously, I don't want to discredit him, but if given the 2 poison pills of Jefferson or Hawkinson, I'm taking Hawkinson all day long. And I trust that having Alexander Zalone kind of guard the middle a little bit is going to take away Hawkinson and his ability if we can get him out there a little bit. So
yeah, and it did look like there was a lot of wide open guys that Green Bay, based on their defense, they allowed a lot of guys to get wide open. So I think it's going to be a key to make sure you have all your T's and I's taken care of without getting too fancy out there.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, I think for us to slow them down, for us to take these drives away, it comes down to red zone defense. For any drive that they're not going to score from 40 yards out on a crazy play or something like that, we have to be disciplined. We have to be sound. We're going to have to get more from DJ Reader. I know he's been kind of banged up here a little bit. We got to get his best game of the year if we can still get that out of him. Week 18, not having a Liam in the middle there, this is where it starts to hurt, for what we're getting in there. But again, we're going to need Branch and Joseph to just be the absolute studs that they are. Patrol, be the 2 high safeties, take away the deep passing shots, and hopefully we can get some turnovers like we had against San Francisco to stop those drives, get the ball back in our hands. Conversely, on offense, we got to run the ball. We got to have longer drives. We got to make sure that that Minnesota offense gets out of rhythm.
And let's get into that offense. A lot has been talked about this season about Brian Flores and his defense for Minnesota. They're a heavy, heavy, heavy blitzing squad. They're really big into confusion and moving guys around, even down to the final seconds before the ball is snapped, disguising
Yeah.
looks. You really never know what you're going to get. The Lions didn't have a real huge problem moving the ball against the Vikings the first game of the season series when they played them in Minnesota. They put 31 points on the board. They put up over 390 yards of offense. Aside from a slow start in the first quarter, they were able to do a lot of good things against that defense. We're going to still, though, without question, Phil, we're going to need all hands on deck. We're going to need a solid running game. We're going to be committed to the run. Goff's going to need to have a mistake-free day, and it's going to have to be a well-oiled offensive performance. How can they make that possible against this Brian Flores defensive scheme they're going to be going up against that knows that they made a few mistakes the first time around, and they're going to be looking to try and correct some things?
Well, I think it all comes down to the protection, and I don't know if he's been hurt, but I have seen Penei Sewell get beat more often here recently than I have in the past. So I think he needs to have a big game. I think on the other side, Taylor Decker needs to protect Goff. We're going to win the game because of our passing attack, and being efficient on third down when we're in those situations, continuing drives and not getting off the field. You get that by having your offensive line keep Goff upright and just watch out for these exotic blitzes that Brian Flores can draw up, and probably the best in the NFL, quite frankly, at those exotic blitzes and everything. So the other part of that is I think they're going to have a lot of corner blitzes as well. Yeah, they always have to watch out for JMO going deep. On a corner blitz, if Goff can pick up on it really early on, but they do a lot of kind of blitzing from the cornerback spot on the backside there, from what I've been able to see from the Minnesota defense. So that's always a drive killer when we get one of those, and then all of a sudden we're in, second and 22 or something like that, something crazy. So that's the key for me, is we need the production up front to be solid.
And then in the kicking game, we saw Jake Bates miss a field goal. We saw him miss an extra point. Minnesota has a rookie kicker as well. They got Will Reichard, the kid out of Alabama, who has had a solid year by rookie standards. He did battle some injury earlier on in the year, and there's some questions of, is he all the way fully healthy yet? So a couple of rookie kickers in the game, too. That kind of offsets things in the special teams department.
It does, but I think on the whole, Lions fans, I think we're at the point where we can trust Jake Bates. We know what he's got. That Houston game sold him to me, and what he was able to do and being so pivotal in that comeback. So I feel pretty good with what we've got versus what they offer on the special team side.
So it seems like Vegas always seems to have a sense of what's up. So as of time of recording, the Lions are 3-point favorites, which you can pretty much always build in 3 points just for being at home. It's almost like when you're taking a test in high school, you get points just for putting your name on the test.
Yeah.
So just the fact the Lions are playing at home, that's 3 points right there. So you can basically call this one a pick 'em. So it seems like no matter what happens, everyone's expecting this one to be down to a razor-thin margin. There is no margin for error, really, in this game. Those are some of the scarier situations to be a part of.
They are. But look at back the games that we've lost this year. They were slow starts. They were not doing things the right way. It was Goff and the protection or the receivers not being on the same page. And it would took, until drive 3 or 4 to really get things in gear. We can't have a slow start. I don't think in a lot of these drives we can settle for field goals either. If we settle for a field goal instead of a touchdown, that's a win for Minnesota in the defense,
Field
because
goals
they
get you
know what
beat.
they're capable of. Yeah, and this is a case of we need all the touchdowns we can get. So fans, if you're listening, if you're watching the game, be prepared, because you better believe in this game, with everything on the line, I can guarantee you we're going to see Brad Campbell go for it a couple times on fourth down. Just
So,
making that
what is going to be
expectation.
your criteria personally as far so like let's kind of make this more of a tangible situation here. So,
Sure.
what point, what scenario do you go for it, and what point do you settle for a field goal in your mind? What's kind of that line in the sand?
Um, so I would say within the Vikings 40, and you're within a fourth and 4. I think fourth and 5, and anything outside of the 40-yard line, I think you have to punt. And you have to hope that when Jack Fox punts it, it can get within the 10-yard line, the 5-yard line. You pin them deep, you bring Ford Field alive, and you can at least get Darnold, hearing things or getting off beat a little bit here. Outside of that, I'm I'll be honest with you, Vince. I see Dan Campbell going for it 3 or 4 times in this game if he really has to. That's how important the continuancy of these drives is going to be, versus punting versus going for a field goal. Now there's going to be some situations where we got to kick regardless, right? So not kind of counting those in, but just be prepared for the good old Dan Gamble kind of character of Dan Campbell coming out.
You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar and Phil Byrne breaking down the Lions' win over the 49ers on Monday Night Football this past Monday. And more importantly, looking ahead to, I know I keep saying this week after week, Phil, but once again, the biggest regular season game in Lions history coming up
Yeah,
Sunday Night Football against the Vikings, 14-2 versus 14-2. You can't ask for anything more exhilarating as an NFL fan, especially if you have no dog in a fight. What do you buy into, Phil? From a, of course, I have to drop a little conspiracy theorism here. What do you buy into as far as the NFL script is concerned? What is best for the NFL based on the outcome of this game? Do you think it's best for the NFL at large for the Vikings to be able to pull off this win, or the Lions?
I would say it's a Lions because I think Dan Campbell is probably the most marketable head coach. I think he supersedes any player on the Lions, quite frankly, even here locally when it comes to popularity. I think maybe here's the thing with Minnesota. Justin Jefferson is a phenomenal talent. I think most people would consider him to be the best receiver in the NFL, even though we love St. Brown and everything that he can do. And this is not a slight at him by any means,
And he has
um,
burned us more times than we can count.
for sure. But I think from like a marketing side piece, it's you either get the Lions, Dan Campbell, this incredible story, or eventually you would get Saquon Barkley, the big market Philadelphia Eagles with their following, the Bradley Cooper, fan celebrities, things like that. And of course, the Kansas City Chiefs or Buffalo Bills. That's probably what they want, some combination of that. No slight against Minnesota, but Sam Darnold, Aaron Jones, T.J. Hawkinson, Harrison Smith. I mean, they're fine players, and I'm not slighting them here, but I don't think they're going to get the Taylor Swift crowd, the football outsiders that just so happen to come in and really have a big interest if it's Minnesota in the Super Bowl, or even an NFC Championship game or something like that, as opposed to the Detroit Lions.
So, again, we are recording this middle of the week just based on the fact that the Lions played Monday Night Football against the 49ers. We had New Year's Eve, New Year's Day mixed in there. So, this was kind of a
Yeah,
funky week. We'll get back to doing it every Sunday night where we
yeah,
record and drop them every Monday morning here as soon as the schedule kind of gives us the leeway to be able to do so. But the advantage to doing this a little bit later in the week, Phil, is kind of like the practice report that we dropped earlier on in the
yeah.
episode. We get a little bit more midweek intel than we would usually have just fresh off the game. So here's what we do have. We know who will be the officiating crew for the Sunday night game. So we will have Brad Rogers and his crew as our referee and team. So you may wonder, well, hey, what else has he done for us lately? So he was the official when the Lions went to Arizona and came away with a 7-point win back in week 3. So that's the only time that the Lions have seen him this season. He has not called any Vikings games this season. He happened to be on hand for the Lions' 30-20 victory over the Vikings at Ford Field last year, a game that didn't have nearly as much writing on it because by that point the Lions had already wrapped up the division and that was as good as it was going to get. He also happened to have officiated the Lions' regular season finale 2 years ago against Green Bay, a game that the Lions did get the victory in, meaningless as far as postseason implications go. He's about a 13 to 14 flag per game official. Pretty well respected, though. I don't think he is embroiled in a whole bunch of controversy from a certain game. I know that the Lions had him out to officiate the, what do they call those things in the preseason? Those inter-squad scrimmage practices over the course of the training camps. He was on hand last season to he had Detroit as his kind of hub for the training camp last season. So that's what we're looking at, Phil. We're not looking at Brad Allen or Clete Blakeman or teams that we know that we've had a checkered past with. It looks like the NFL is assigning a respectable official to this game, which is good. But we do know that the Vikings draw more pass interference and benefit from more pass interference than any other team in the NFL. The Lions are called for more pass interference penalties than any other team in football. So it's not good that we're on that side of that stat. It's not good that the Vikings are on the side they are of the other stat. So we're just almost gonna have to hope for the best here.
And I think that's a great point, which you brought up here. I think when we're looking at like storyline, game development, the crux of it here, we got to get the Minnesota offense off the field. We have to control the pace of this game. We have to dictate the rules of it, play it to how we want to play it. And Terry and Arnold, I hate to put so much pressure and spotlight and highlight a rookie player like this, but welcome to the big leagues, kid. You got to go guard the top wideout in the league in a pressure pack situation, and you got a checkered pass so far this year with those PI calls. We can't have any of this game at all. And I'd love to say that I had the full expectation that he won't get any, and this is just a thing of the past, but it'll probably happen once or twice, 3 times, 4 times. It can't happen though. Like that is, if we have that many against one player in one situation, and knowing that most likely he's going up against Justin Jefferson, I think that is a recipe for defeat.
But that just goes to show that's exactly why the Lions need to generate some level of pass rush. I know we've been saying this all season, but this is exactly why, because now you're expecting more out of it's hard to call him a rookie after 17 weeks worth at this point, but you're asking so much of these guys who, based on the man coverage that they've been playing, you've got guys on islands out there, and you need to at least generate some level of pass rush. You need to get home at least some of the time to at least give Sam Darnold a somewhat of a ticking clock in his mind that, hey, this is at least something I need to be concerned about, instead of just hawking it up 5,000 and just hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a super, super big pivotal piece of the puzzle for Sunday night.
So let's break down the schedule a little bit, because I know you're going to say, well, it's one game and the only thing that matters is what happens in that 60 minutes, and I get it, but this is a good way to kind of hone in on some trends of maybe being able to pick up on tendencies and what have you. So let's look at the Vikings schedule first, Phil. Since the Week 6 Vikings bye week, how many playoff teams have the Vikings been walking away victorious from? How many playoff teams have they beat since their Week 6 bye week?
Asking me how
I'm asking you to guess.
I'd say 5, maybe.
1. Since their Week 6 bye week, the Packers were the only playoff teams that the Vikings have defeated.
No
that just
kidding.
happened a few days ago.
Oh.
So even though they've been winning all this time after their bye week, they lost to the Lions. And then on a short week on Thursday Night Football, they went out to the West Coast and lost to the Rams in a somewhat controversial finish. They have not lost a game since then. But all of those wins, with the exception of the Green Bay one that happened most recently, were not to playoff teams. So they beat Indianapolis by 8, one-score game. They won at Jacksonville by 5, one-score game. They won at the Titans by 10. They went to Chicago and won by a field goal in overtime. They beat the Cardinals by a point in a game that Arizona, in my mind, committed coaching malfeasance based on their late game handling of things. They
Yeah.
did beat Atlanta 42-21, so that was probably their best overall performance. And then they followed that up with a Monday night victory at the Bears 30-12. Tight finish at Seattle. They won by a field goal late, and Green Bay, even though they won by 2, that one seemed like it was more lopsided than the score indicated. But that's the proof in the pudding right there, Phil. The Lions, kind of like the Vikings, got criticized for beating up on a lot of AFC South teams and a lot of bottom feeders, but you can definitely say the same for Minnesota. Haven't really beat anybody of note, and the way it's been all since Kevin O'Connell has been the coach there, a lot of one-score games. So it's not like they go out there and just beat the living heck out of teams. They can definitely be beat no matter what. It's like we kind of talked about it. A lot of it's going to be between the ears and holding true to your assignments.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, trying to play this game on your terms and not getting those flagrant pass interference calls, I think, are going to be so key. But it's pretty interesting talking about inflation for wins and things like that. And a win is a win, no matter how you slice it, right? But truly a win, and sometimes the effort or the team that you're going up against, they are not all judged equal for sure.
And for comparison's sake, the Lions have 4 such victories over playoff teams since the Minnesota Vikings Week 6 bye week, including a victory over the Vikings earlier in the season, 2 against the Packers, 1 on the road against the Houston Texans. And we've already talked about earlier in the podcast, Phil, how many times the Lions have been able to put up 40 or more points in a game. They're as good as doing that as just about any other team in football. And just from a game control standpoint, the Lions have been winning their games a little bit more emphatically, whereas the Vikings have had to grind them out and kind of be the champion of the one-score game more often than the Lions have.
Yep. Yep. So something to keep in mind as we head into the game on Sunday.
So I don't think we really need to spend much time talking about the other teams in the NFC North. I think the Bears, based on the 6-3 loss this past Thursday night to the Seattle Seahawks, I think that all but proved that they are in a much worse place from a franchise health standpoint than anybody gave them credit for. And I'm guilty of it too. I bought into the hype with all the new talent on the offensive side of the ball coming in. And we talked about the tweet that Caleb tweeted out to the punter they just brought in saying, you're not going to be needing to punt too often with us, so you better get used to that sideline. And we've seen him more often than just about any other player on that offense making plays. So it seems like the Bears need to nail this head coaching search no matter what they do. Do you think it's a slam dunk that it's going to be Ben Johnson, or are you not quite ready to sign an ink just yet?
No, I won't, because I think Mike Vrabel is going to return to the NFL as a head coach. I think the only other spot outside of the NFL would have been if Ohio State and Ryan Day were to separate. But of course, they've looked pretty solid so far. In the playoffs, of course, this is prior to the Rose Bowl later tonight as we're taping this, so we will see. But I would venture that Mike Vrabel is probably going to factor into that Bears job, at least get an interview. I think at the heart of it, Ben Johnson and being part of what we've developed here, I would be willing to say that at the end of the day, I don't think he wants to go in division. I don't want to say burn bridges, but have to go against this Lions team and everyone that he has helped along the way on a twice yearly basis. Now, money talks, right? You have no idea what Chicago is going to throw out there. You have no idea what sort of front office promises they're going to get. But I know the one thing that he continues to go back on is he wants to have front office alignment. He wants to have good ownership. And I'm sorry, Bears fans, that's not what you have, right? He turned down the Carolina Panthers because that's what they had prior to this year. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that he goes there.
Okay, Phil, we'll get into some game picks to wrap things up now. And it's going to be a little bit different because this is kind of unique in the sense that we don't have a whole lot of other games that have things writing on it like this Vikings-Lions matchup does. Just kind of looking at the NFL slate, a lot is pretty much decided.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a matter of moving pieces around. This game that's going to be at Ford Field this weekend, you'll be in attendance, by far the most meaningful from a playoff implication standpoint.
Quick side piece. Guess what? I am not going to be in attendance for it, Vince.
What?
Yeah. So a couple months ago, we put these tickets up thinking we were going to clinch by then, and we were going to help pay for playoff tickets once they paid it off. Forgot they were up there, and of course, someone, basically, went on Ticketmaster and bought them. Hey, we're happy with what we're getting paid for it, but yeah, we're just going to be watching the confines of the home, so we'll make the experience a little bit different.
Well, at least that means that you should have maybe an easier time waking up the following morning, maybe, possibly.
Yeah. These night games have I've taken so many half days or late starts to days at work, just based on the Lions schedule here. So just a little side piece when we get into our discussion about the game. So little programming note there.
So picks are going to look a little different just because a lot of these games aren't going to matter. And I know that's kind of the NFL's worst nightmare, that a lot of the 1 o'clock and 4:25 games are just kind of going to be games that are played in name only, and that's about it. You got guys out there making business decisions, or guys that are just out there who knows what. But let's take a look at the game that's going to be played on Saturday night with the Monday Night Football crew broadcasting the game on ESPN. The Cincinnati Bengals absolutely need to beat the Steelers on the road. Steelers laying 1.5 as they travel to the Three River City in a gotta-have-it spot. Phil, who you got?
I am going to go Bengals in this one. I just like the momentum with what I've seen from them lately.
I do too. Joe Burrow's out there playing like a superstar, and the Steelers have not looked right for a number of weeks in a row, even though Pittsburgh already has that wild card spot wrapped up based on what they've done up until the last month or so. They are not looking good heading into the playoff run. Give me the Bengals to at least do their part to stay afloat in the AFC playoffs. The team that they are fighting against is the Miami Dolphins. They are clinging to the playoffs by a nano thread here. It's the Dolphins laying a point as they travel to the Meadowlands to take on the New York Jets. Again, got to have it spot for the Dolphins, but they don't play well in cold weather regardless of who it's against.
I think this is going to be an ugly game. I really do. The Jets are absolutely soulless. I don't really want to pick the Jets, but I really don't want to pick the Dolphins. So I guess I'm going Jets, and the Bengals get in. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to go with the Jets also, just because we don't know if Tua's going to be good to go injury-wise. We know what the weather is going to be like in the Meadowlands, which is going to be cold. And the Jets have been full of surprises this year, and who knows, that might be just a screw you to the franchise, hindering their draft stock ever so slightly by adding a win to the season total and forcing them into a slightly worse draft pick. I guess give me the Jets for chaos purposes. We're not going to bother picking the Broncos game because that's the third piece of the puzzle to the AFC playoffs. The Broncos need to lose in order for the Bengals or the Dolphins to really have any chance. We've been told as of this morning that the Chiefs do plan to sit guys. Patrick Mahomes will not start. It will be Carson Wentz that makes the start against the Broncos. So Broncos are coming to this one 10.5-point favorites. So it looks like it's set up for the Broncos to be able to clinch a playoff spot just based on the fact that Kansas City will not be taking this game particularly seriously. So it's gonna take some crazy stuff happening for it to go a different way than the Broncos getting the final wild card spot, but we shall see. I don't usually like to do this, Phil, just because we spend so much time talking about it, and I think we're both a little bit too biased here, but I'll add it to the list. The Lions lay in 3 as they host the Vikings Sunday Night Football in game number 272 in the NFL season. Who's it going to be?
I like Lions to win, but Vikings to cover. I think this is a 1-point squeaker, and we are literally white knuckling it the whole game. I think that's what's going to happen in this one.
I think the only way for the Lions to prove that there's no semblance of the dreaded 3 letters whatsoever, because that's going to be a boogeyman scenario right there, Phil. If you have in one year the Lions coughing up a 17-point second half lead for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and the following year notching 14 wins and having it still not be enough to so much as win your own division, much less get the number 1 overall seed in the playoffs. What did San Francisco need a year ago? 12 to get the job done? And this year, 14 won't even be enough. I think that's a little bit of boogeyman stuff. I can't wrap my brain around reconciling that. Give me the Lions to win the game straight up and cover, because that's the only way. 2025 has to be off to a good start, and what better way to kick things off, right?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, that's the best we can do, guys, and we appreciate you spending your post-New Year's with us on Kneecaps for Breakfast. Biggest regular season game in franchise history on the horizon. Phil and I will be here to break it down with you and look ahead to the playoffs, because that's a given. So we hope that you will join us next time on Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.